Boker Tov. Today's daf is Daf Lamed Ches in קידושין, as we learn for Forshlem for Los Ruma and Yosef ben Chamichal. Tanya Idach, about the 10th line down on the page on Lamed Ches where we left off yesterday. We were talking about when they were in the Midbar and they came into Eretz Yisrael, and it says there that they ate the man for 40 years. Did they eat it really for 40? Did they really eat it for 40 complete years? Technically, they went out. Nisan came in, and Nisan, even if it's a partial year, it's usually considered a full year. The Mefarshim say that if you really counted it that way from Nisan to Nisan, you really should count it 41 years. But the point here is that it wasn't 40 complete years. Did they really eat for 40 years? They only ate it for 40 years, less a month, less 30 days. Why? Because Hashem started to give them the man in ER after they complained, and they stopped already by Nisan when they came into Eretz Yisrael. It was already done. We saw yesterday that they actually stopped when Moshe died, and they ate it. They continued. It didn't come down anymore, but they kept eating it. They had supplies of the man until they came to Eretz Yisrael. But the point is that they only started in ER. And they finished Nisan, so you're short a month. It didn't go Nisan to Nisan, it went ER to Nisan. In other words, the truth is they really only ate it for 39 years and 11 months that it came down for them, that ate it. They ate it, right, they ate the man for 39 years plus 11 months, short a month of 40 years. But the supplies, the provisions that they took out of Mitzrayim when they crossed the river, when they crossed the Yam Suf, and they came, those supplies also tasted like man. That's why it says that they ate man for 40 years. Not the truth is they didn't eat the man that came down from heaven for a full 40 years. That was only 39 years plus. But they ate the provisions that they came from Mitzrayim, and those also taste like man. Another Brisa said, B'Shiva ba'Adar meis Moshe. We know that Moshe died on the 7th day of Adar. We're going to explain how we know that in a moment. So he died on the 7th of Adar. B'Shiva ba'Adar, no, he was also born that same day, 120 years earlier. How do we know that he died on the 7th of Adar? Shenemar. Now let's look at the psukim. Moshe died there. In the plains of Moab, meaning before they came to Eretz Yisrael, they mourned him, they cried for him for 30 days after he died. Ksiv says, Moshe. As soon as Moshe died, Eved Hashem, what happened? Ksiv Moshe Abdi Meis, Hashem said to Yoshua, Moshe, my servant has died, but now come and pass, have the Jews pass into Eretz Yisrael. Ksiv Ivru Bekev Machna, go through the camp, and command the people, Lamor, to prepare provisions. In other words, all this took place as soon as Moshe died. In 3 more days, you're going to pass over the Jordan. They came up to the Yarden. It was also with the Ness, of course, with the splitting of the Jordan. But they came up from the Yarden into Israel on the 10th of the first month, which would be the 10th of Nisan. So what happened here? Moshe died. They mourned him for 30 days. Then Hashem commanded Yeshua to take Bnei Yisrael into Eretz Yisrael, across the Jordan River. And that took place 3 days later. 3 days later, after the mourning period was over. So how many days is it since Moshe died? 33 days. 30 days of mourning, the Shloshim, and 3 days of preparations. That's 33 days. Semi and Shloshim Shlosha Yomim Lemafreya. So think back. It says in the pasuk they came up from the Jordan on the 10th day of Nisan. So what's 33 days before? That would be the day that Moshe died. That would be the 7th of Adar, because after Adar comes Nisan. So if they came into the Eretz Yisrael on the 10th of Nisan, and 33 days before that Moshe died, that would be the 7th of Adar. Halamarta teaches you Shebeshiva Adar Meis Moshe. Moshe died on. That's how we know Moshe died. We all keep the yahrzeit. Zion Adar is Moshe's yahrzeit. How do we know? We know based on these psukim. How do we know he's also born on the 7th of Adar, 120 years prior? Moshe says, Moshe said to them, I'm 120 years old. I can't do this anymore. It's not my job to lead you anymore. I can't go in and out. It doesn't mean physically. Because we said lo nas lecho, he was still perfectly in perfect physical shape at 120 years old, but he couldn't carry the burden anymore. Why does it say that may have shana hayom? Today I'm 120 years. What's about 100? Just say I'm 120 years old. What does it mean today? Hashem fulfills their years perfectly, from day to day, month to month, meaning I'm exactly 120 years old today, meaning the day that he died was also his birthday. Hashem says, I will fill your days. I will fill your days, meaning you'll have complete years, complete days, complete years. So he lived exactly 120 years. You might even say minute to minute. So that's another drasha about coming into Eretz Yisrael and the days. Here we talked about it because we were getting to the Mun and the issue of Chadash, and could they get this machlokas? Is Chadash Aser in Chutz La'aretz or not before Matan Torah? That was what we did. That's how we got into this discussion. Tanya Rav Shimon Omer. We're about 7-8 lines from the bottom of the page on Lamed Ches Amud Aleph. Three mitzvahs they were commanded when they came into Israel. What are they? Arla, Klayim, and Chadash, as we've talked about. The Nogas Bein Ba'aretz, but they apply both in Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz, like Rabbi Lezer said in the Mishnah. Chutzman, in other words, normally mitzvahs that are Tluis Ba'aretz are only Noeg in Eretz Yisrael, not Noeg in Chutz La'aretz. But Arla and Klayim are exceptions, and Rabbi Lezer had a Chadash also. So he says, "V'hu adin shenugaba," and hu adin. It makes sense that we should be noeg these mitzvahs. Why? Uma chadash. Look at it. What are the three? Arla, Klayim, and chadash. Ma chadash ain't suras or olam. Chadash is not also forever. It's only also until the 16th day through the 16th day of Nisan. Beini suras or anah. You're allowed to have anah even before, while it's still also for you to eat. You can still cut some and give it to your animals for animal feed. V'yesh heterli suro. What's usher now? This same food, this same piece of matzah or bread, whatever, which is also, it's usually on, if you're talking about on Pesach, it's matzah, right? But this same piece of matzah, which is also now, the 15th and the 16th in the morning, there's a heter if you bring the carbon omer. As soon as you bring the carbon omer, it's mutter. So, manach, these chadash, which is not also forever, right? And it's not also bana. And even what's also now is mutter 5 minutes later after bringing the carbon omer. No Eikbein Bars, but still, even though it has these kulas, it applies both in Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz. Klayim, Shesunas or Olim, Klayim, which is more of a prohibition. Why? Because if you plant Klayim, if you plant grapevines with other seeds, as we'll see, with two kinds of other species of Klayim, that's also forever. You can never eat that stuff. Isurin or no, you can't have enough of them. You have to burn it, get rid of it, bury it. Beinet el Isurin. And there's no time that it ever becomes doesn't become mutter later on. Right, doesn't become milestone. Certainly, so it makes sense that it certainly should be also since it has more prohibitions involved in chadash, and chadash is also bein baris ben chutz. Why? Because we're darshaning the idea of Moshe that we saw yesterday. Moshe means b'chol Moshe v'osechem, not Moshe after you settle, but we darshan. If you say the chadash is also menat Torah in Chutz La'aretz and in Eretz Yisrael, that's because we darshan Moshe v'osechem. Right? When we talk about Moshe Sechem, it means wherever you live. So if Chodesh, which has these leniencies, that ain't Isuras or Olam, and it's not Asur Bana, and there's Heter Isuras, still it's Asur in Eretz Yisrael as well as Chutz La'aretz, as well as Eretz Yisrael. So Klayim, which has all these leniencies, certainly should be Asur even in Chutz La'aretz. And the last line of the page says, V'hu adin la'arla b'shtayim. Arla, two of these things apply to Arla. What are the two? So number one, that it's Asur B'hana, and there's no it's not also forever, right? Because in the fourth year or the fifth year for sure, you're allowed to eat from the tree. It is for the first 3 years, and there's no heter. The stuff that grows in the first 3 years is certainly also there's no heter for that. So 2 out of the 3 chumras apply to Arla, just like all 3 applied to Klayim. 2 out of 3 apply to Arla. So, but certainly it's a kal v'chom for Arla too, because by Chadash none of these things applied, and by Arla 2 of them applied. So therefore, he says this price is Shivni Yochai says that 3 mitzvahs they were commanded when they came to Eretz Yisrael, and they're no ben baritz ben mechutz la'aretz. So he would hold their all the Raisa apparently. Rav Lezer, Rav Shimon, because the Kavachom is also the rice. Rav Lezer, Rav Shimon argues. Lezer on his father, Rav Shimon, that was Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, we just said, and he holds a chodesh is not noig in chutz la'aretz, and all the climb and eino ela tzalach l'mosh Sinai or the Beisofim, as we'll see. So Rav Shimon says no. On his base now, he says like this: Kol mitzvah she'esav Yisrael kam k'nasas la'aretz. Any mitzvah that they were commanded before they came to Eretz Yisrael, and Rashi says that means to say a mitzvah sanoig b'guf, which is a chavas guf, an obligation on the person. There was no aretz before they came to Eretz Yisrael. There was no aretz, right? There was no Eretz Yisrael. But even if there was something that they said could apply, that didn't apply. They didn't. No rules were applied to the Jews regarding stuff that grows out of the ground before they came to Israel. Kol mitzvah she'esav Yisrael kam k'nasas means mitzvahs which are chavas guf, like Shabbos, Tefillin, etc. Mezuzah. No, I guess by Mars as applies both in Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz, like mitzvah which is chavas guf. Any mitzvah lach k'nasas, any mitzvah that they got only after they came into Eretz Yisrael, which means things that are dependent on the ground. Ain't no egel bars, it only applies to bars, except for two exceptions. Chutz min hashmatas ksafim shiur chavadim. Hashmatas ksafim meaning the release of debts at the end of the Shemitah year, because we paskin that Shemitah is only mishamet b'sof hashana. So, except the releasing of debts, which is not fluyus baritz, that's something which is chavas aguf. That applies even chutz min hashmatas v'shil chakan, which mishaptish and establish even though they were only commanded after they came into Israel. No, I guess by chutz la'aretz. Shiluch havadim means that the evidence goes out at Yovel, right? Even if his ear is pierced, he goes out at Yovel. Those two mitzvahs, even though they were only commanded them after they came into Israel, but they still apply in chutz la'aretz also. Says the Gemara, what do you mean? Hashmatas ksafim chavas agufut. It's chavas aguf, so they were commanded about those things before they came into Israel. So why do you say they were, except for general mitzvahs that were commanded only after they came into Israel, which meaning things that are dependent on the ground, those apply only in Eretz Yisrael, with the exception of Hashmatas except for Shiur Chavadim. What do you mean? Those things were applied even before they came into Eretz Yisrael. Those are chavas aguf. So in Yitzchak Tanya for this drush, the Tanya Rabbi Omer said Devar Hashmita Shamot. Because about Shemitah, it says Zedvar Shemitah. These are the rules of Shemitah, releasing all your produce, etc., and ksafim shamot. It says hashmita shamot, double osh. We're talking about two different kinds of release. One is releasing the land that it's not yours; it's hefker to everybody. You can't work the land. Releasing of debts at the end of the year. When you are mishamat the karka, meaning in Eretz Yisrael, you're not mishamik stuff. In other words, if it's a time to go, let's say after when we're now in Golis, or where they were in the Midbar, when there was no Shemitah's Karka, there's no Shemitah's Ksafim. That's what he means over here. He doesn't mean to say that a Shemitah's Ksafim was really they were commanded after. The truth is, Shemitah's Ksafim could have been there before. The question is really, it's a Mitzvah Aguf, Chavas Aguf. What is that? Why does that depend on the land? Saying except for these things, that even though they're dependent on the land, they apply in chutz la'aretz. Well, what do you mean? What do you mean? They don't depend on land. The answer is this pasuk of Shemitah Shamot connects the two. When there's Shemitah's karka, when they live in Eretz Yisrael, and there was a yishuv in Eretz Yisrael, then there's Shemitah's ksafim. When there's no Shemitah in Eretz Yisrael, there's no Shemitah's ksafim. The Ema maybe means this. So there, Shemitah's ksafim even in chutz la'aretz. Right, even in chutz la'aretz. Today we do Shemitah ksafim, and that's clearly on the Rabbanan. So Shemitah, maybe it means this, but maybe it doesn't mean that Shemitah's ksafim applies in chutz la'aretz when there's Shemitah's karka in Eretz Yisrael. Maybe it means in the place where the Shemitah's karka, which is only in Eretz Yisrael, there is Shemitah's ksafim. Maybe it means that there's no Shemitah's ksafim, there's no release of debts outside of Eretz Yisrael. It only means in the place where there's Shemitah, then there's Shemitah's ksafim. When there's no Shemitah, there's no Shemitah's ksafim. Shemitah applies all over. God called Shemitah sounds to say like it's a generalization to tell you that it applies even in chutz la'aretz. So therefore, the drasha is when there's Shemitah's karka, when there's the time of the base of Mikdash, then there's Shemitah's ksafim all over the world that are raisa. When there's no Shemitah's karka, like Bisman has said, there's no Shemitah's karka d'oraisa. There's no Shemitah's ksafim d'oraisa, but it's rather only drabbanan. What was the other mitzvah that applied, even though even though it's a mitzvah saguf that applies also in Chutz La'aretz. Why is that? Shiluch Havadim, sending away the Avadim and Yobas. That's also Chavos Saguf. What does that depend on the land? Salach Amam, thinks it says Ukrosim Dora Ba'aretz. It says in call out freedom and Yovel, call out freedom in the land. Ba'aretz and Chutz La'aretz. Maybe it applies in Eretz Yisrael. And if you have a slave in Chutz La'aretz, maybe he doesn't go out at Yovel. Tamalomer Yovel he mikol makom. Yovel applies all over. And came out Tamalomer Ba'aretz. So what does it mean Ba'aretz? This man shadra, but it's when Yovel applies in Eretz Yisrael, and therefore the slaves are freed. No, b'chutz la'aretz, then the slaves are freed in chutz la'aretz as well. Ain't draw noigbarts if there's no freedom in Eretz Yisrael because there's no Yovel, like we don't have Yovel today. Ain't no b'chutz la'aretz, doesn't apply in chutz la'aretz either. Tanan Hassam. Let's go back to our issue of chadash. Chadash is the new grain which is not permitted to be eaten until the Omer. So we said in the Mishnah, Tanakama held. Tanakama was that the only mitzvahs that are totally in the land which apply in chutz la'aretz are Arla and Klaim. Rav Lezer added chadash also. So this mission is also going to go with this concept like Rav Lezer that chadash is also min haTorah. Tanan Hassam, we learn here like this in Arla. A chadash also min haTorah b'choma. Chadash is aser throughout the world min haTorah. Why? Because it says Moshev Seichem, Moshev, wherever you live. Chadash is aser. Arla. What about Arla in Chutz La'aretz? Arla in Eretz Yisrael is a pasuk, right? Arla is halacha. What does halacha usually mean? Halacha l'Moshe Sinai. You're going to see a machlokas about that. But Klaim is only midivrei sofim. Klaim is only aser midrabanan in Chutz La'aretz. And we're going to talk about this today and tomorrow about which Klaim we're speaking about. There's different kinds of Klaim. There's Klaim, of course, of animals, right? You can't mix animals, right? There's Klaim of shotless clothing. You can't do that in Chutz La'aretz either, right? We don't wear shotless. There's climb of trees, grafting trees, and there's climb of seeds, of mixing seeds with grapes. Okay, grain seeds with seeds. We're going to talk about all that. But the Pashto on the Mishnah is Chadash is min haTorah wherever you are in the world, in the entire world. Arla in Chutz La'aretz is only halacha, say halacha Moshe Sinai, and climb is only drabanan in Chutz La'aretz. Obviously, which climb are we speaking about? We'll talk about that. In Eretz Yisrael, everything is also okay. My halacha. What do we mean that Arla is only Aser halacha? So we have machlokes. Amir b'Shmuel hilchos Medina. It's a minig. Medina, they custom. Rashi says inigu heimalei b'chutz la'aretz. They had a minig to keep Arla in chutz la'aretz too, although it's not the oraisa at all. Ulam Rabbi Yochanan halacha, which is usually what it usually means in Shas is halacha Moshe Sinai. It's not the favorish in the Torah. It's halacha that Hashem gave to Moshe, meaning it's Torah Shabbal Peh. Halacha Moshe Sinai. So first we have machlokas. What is Arla? Is Arla in Chutz La'aretz, of course, and not talking about Eretz Yisrael. And Arla, of course, Arla is in Eretz Yisrael is chai. But Arla in Chutz La'aretz, is it halacha Moshe Sinai, or is it only a minik like a drabanan? Amarle Ula, who said it's halacha Moshe Sinai, said to Rav Yehuda, who said in the name of Shmuel that it's only a minik. I understand you. Bishlam, according to me, that means halacha Moshe Sinai. That I say Arla in Chutz La'aretz halacha Moshe Sinai. Haina the Shalom, Safek Arla, Safek Line. I could tell you that makes sense why we make a difference between Suffolk Arla in Chutz La'aretz and Suffolk Klaim in Chutz La'aretz. Because Arla is halacha Moshe Sinai. So by a Suffolk, we're a little bit more machmer. Klaim, which is only drabanan, so by a Suffolk, we're more makel. As we see now, Ditnan, we say over there in Arla, it says like this. Suffolk Arla ba'aretz, if it's Suffolk Arla in Eretz Yisrael is usher, because it's Suffolk Araisa, right? Arla in Eretz Yisrael is certainly usher. This Surya, which is not considered part of Eretz Yisrael, it's mutter because it's a suffix. Okay, suffix. Now we're going to talk. Gemara is going to say, what do you mean? If it's a daraisa, right? If it's a daraisa that it's halacha Moshe Sinai, why is it mutter in Surya? The Gemara will ask that. We're going to come to that question. You should ask that question right now. If he holds it's halacha Moshe Sinai, that means it's a daraisa. So if it's a suffix daraisa, we should go to chumrah. But he says no. Surya is mutter. We'll see why. B'chutz la'aretz. In Chutz La'aretz, out even further than Syria, right? Not next to Chutz La'aretz. You could even go l'chachila yored v'lokech, even if you know that the goy is gathering something which is possible Arla, you can go buy from him. Yored v'lokech, b'shlo yiren v'lokech. You shouldn't see it directly. You shouldn't see him gathering it in, but you know he's playing around with it there, and he might, as a suffix, it's okay to buy from him. Rashi says yored yisrael v'lokech minavkam halokit mepardas sheyesh bonatias yolados. How do you have a suffix? How is there a suffix Arla? Well, number one, you're not sure how old the tree is. Is it 3 years or is it 5 years, right? How old is the tree? That's one suffix. Another suffix could be, you know you have new trees there, but they're planted among older trees that get mixed up. So it's a suffix. Now he's gathering it in. As long as you don't see him take this stuff himself that's a suffix, it's okay to buy from him. That's the rule of Arla. You look at a climb, which is certainly only a drabanan in Chutz La'aretz. We'll see which kind of climb. Tanan, karam anatua yerek. Let's say you had a vineyard that means grapes, that there's some vegetables also in there, also mixed up in there. Right outside the vineyard, they're selling vegetables. There's reason to believe that the vegetables were mixed with the vines, right? Usr, ba'aretz usr, it's a suffix of climb in there. So that's usr, suffix right. So the surya mutter, same thing as Arla, but the Chutz La'aretz were more makel than Arla by Arla. Why? Yored velocate. You can go and gather it yourself. Actually, you shouldn't take it yourself. Rashi says, "Ovad shalyuka," meaning what does Yored velocate mean here? Yored over. You could send the guy down there velocate when I client mamish umochel. He can literally take from that client. Not even a suffix. That's it's a suffix. It means it's a suffix, but you can go take it. Meaning, in the first case of Arla, you can go buy from the guy, but you shouldn't see him gathering it in. Here, you can tell him go down there and he could gather it in, but you shouldn't do it yourself. You shouldn't take it with your own hand. But the point is, you see, you're more makel by client, a suffix client in Chutz La'aretz than by Arla. Again, in Eretz Yisrael, it's all us. In Syria, it's mutter. We'll see. Even if it's a lachmash misinai, which is what Ula says is the case of Arla. But he says, but Ula, this is all part of the question that Ula raised for Abuda. According to me, that Arla is halacha mishmi Sinai and Klaim is only, let's say, drabanan. So I understand why we're more machmer by Arla when what? When you in Chutz La'aretz that you can by Arla we say you can go buy from the guy, but you shouldn't see him gathering it in. When it comes to Klaim, you could even see him gathering it in. He could gather it in, but you shouldn't take it yourself. The point is, we're more machmer by Arla than Klaim. Why? Because Arla is a suffix. By Arla is Chutz La'aretz is Malach Mashmi Sinai, and Klaim is only Drabanan. So by a suffix, we're more machmer by Arla than by Klaim because Klaim is Drabanan and Arla is Malach Mashmi Sinai. Ella the Didach, but according to you, we're at the top now of Lamites. El Didach. Nisne Oze, according to you, that they're both the same. You're saying halacha that Arla is only a minig, and which is like a drabanan, and Klaim is a drabanan. So why shouldn't they both have the same halacha? If it's a suffix, Nisne by chutz, if it's a suffix in chutz, you should say Nisne Oze v'zeh yorei. Either both of them go down and buy it, but don't have them gather it in front of you. Or we can go down and have them gather both. They should both have the same halacha. By a suffix of Arla and a suffix of Klaim in Chutz La'aretz, they should have the same halacha, according to you, according to Yehuda. So the answer to that is Ha'amar Le Shmuel Ravanan. Shmuel, who was Rav Yehuda's Rebbe, Rav Yehuda said the name of Shmuel. Taka said Ravanan. Tani Ozev Zev Yared. Lokech Ozev Zev Lokech Enachnami. He was motivated. Rav Yehuda would say in the name of Shmuel, you're right. They both have the same halacha. We disagree with the way the Mishnah reads. We say that the halacha is suffix Arla and Chutz La'aretz or suffix Klaim Chutz, both have the same halacha, that we're makel. Either go in there and buy it from the guy as long as you don't see it, or go back. You could even see him. You could even have him gather it for you as long as you don't touch it yourself. That's what we make. Marbrei Dravana Masel Kula. Itakas of the Kula Zevzeh Yorei. Velocate. You can actually go down there and have him gather it for you. Bachelor could be a dad. In other words, that they both have the same halacha. So he also held that Arla in Chutz La'aretz is only a minig. It's only a drabanan. It's not a daraisa. Amalei Levi l'Shmuel. Levi said to Shmuel Aryach. That was like a nickname that he had. Some say it's like Al Asur that by Yisrael it'll be passing like Shmuel by Mamonis by passing like Rav when it comes to Yisurim, whatever. But whatever his name, he says Sapekli. You supply me with them. Shmuel held that these were both sfekas, and by a suffix, you can have somebody else gather for you. He says, you know what? You gather it for me. As long as I don't see it being plucked, being gathered in the field, I'm allowed to eat a suffix Arla or a suffix Klaim in a Chutz La'aretz. He says, you gather it for me. Sapekli, Lakot Shelo B'fanai. She is suffix etzli. Ban Ayli. He's speaking about Arla, Rashi says. You can see it, and as it goes with the same shita that Shmuel said, by Rav Yehuda quoted Shmuel as saying, that Arla and Chutz La'aretz is only a minig, it's only a drabanan, it's not a daraisa. Similarly, Rav Abba bar Rav, these two rabbis, Rav Chanan, Rav Avi, Rav Chanan, They also supply one another. As long as you didn't see the other guy picking it up, it's a suffix. It's a suffix. If it's a suffix, therefore I'll eat it. She is suffix. It's the olive is suffix. If you pick it up in chutzlaretz, it's mashma. Even if your mamish picked up arla, but to him it was a suffix. I don't know if it was a suffix. You gave me the stuff. Seems pretty difficult to say that if one knew for sure that it was arla and he gave it to the other guy, guy didn't know that's a suffix. You should have told him that maybe you're talking about where it's real mamish a suffix, that even the one who plucked it was a suffix to him. Amri Charifi de Pompadisa, the wise man, the sharp man of Pompadisa, Rashi says that's Ifa and Abimai, and a rough with Pompadisa. Remember the Gemara in Sanhedrin quotes you out of a base, tells you whenever there's a nickname for certain rabbis, like these two refers to who's referred to. The Gemara there says Charifi de Pompadisa, who are they? So Rashi tells us here, Ifa and Avimai ben Rachba, these two brothers. Anyway, they said, Ein arla b'chutz la'aretz. There's no arla in chutz la'aretz, meaning min haTorah, there's no arla in chutz la'aretz. Sholcha, they sent that message, that halacha that the wise men of Pompadisa said, Sholcha Rav Yehuda l'kamed Rav Yochanan. He sent that for Rav Yochanan in Eretz Yisrael. Sholach le, he said to him, stone sveika, conceal that suffix. Don't publicize that. The truth is that it is mutter. A suffix is mutter. A suffix is mutter in chutz la'aretz. You're in chutz la'aretz in Babel, but don't publish it. Don't publish it. If it's vaday arla, you have to destroy it or bury it. And you should, and the pairs that they have that are suffix arla should be stored away. Why? Because they're makel. They're too makel. It's not good to be makel in these halachas. Don't darshan it publicly and destroy it. And these people who are makel with the seal it down. Whoever says that there's no halacha of arla and chutz la'aretz, lo yehelo nin v'nechad, he won't have any progeny. Mashlach chevel begorol b'kal Hashem, quoting a pasuk in Micha, that he will have no descendants who throw a rope in a lottery in the Kal Hashem, meaning they'll have no descendants. Don't publicize that. Don't say there's no halacha of chutz la'aretz. Who do they hold like? They said, these Charifi said, there's no halacha of arla in chutz la'aretz. At least in Torah, there's no halacha in chutz la'aretz. Who do they hold like? Who were they going like? This is Kiyata Tanya, like we learned this price. Rav Lezer, Rav Yossi, some of the girsa, it's Rav Lezer said to Rav Kiyata Tanya. Rav Lezer said, Rav Yossi, Amishim Rav Yossi and Druskama, or it's later on, he says that Rav Lezer, Rav Yossi, this is Rav Lezer, Rav Yossi. Rav Lezer, Rav Yossi said in the name of Yossi ben Durmaska, Sham Mishum Yossi said in the name of Yossi, Sham Mishum Rav Yochanan, Sham Mishum Rav Lezer Gadol, Ein Olav Chutz La'aretz. In other words, these rabbis, these Charifi and Pompadisa, Ifa and Avimai, the sons of Rachba, said it like these other Tanam. You have all these sons of Rav Yossi, the name of Yossi ben Durmaska, said in the name of Sigli, the name of Yochanan, the name of Rav Lezer Gadol. There's no Olav Chutz La'aretz. How could Rav Lezer say Ein Olav Chutz La'aretz? We learned in our Mishnah 2 days ago. Rav Lezer Omer Afa Chodesh. Rav Lezer says, the same Rav Lezer says, not only Arla and Klayim applying Chutz La'aretz, but even Chodesh. This mashma Afa Chodesh is certainly Arla. It says Tani Chodesh. Don't say Afa Chodesh. He's going to learn that, they will learn that when Rav Lezer said in our Mishnah that Chodesh is Asur, even Chutz La'aretz, not Af a Chodesh, but rather Chodesh, but not Arla. Okay, not Chodesh. It's Tani Chodesh. Amr Abasi, Amr Belchan. All of the Chutz La'aretz Moshe Sinai. So Rabbi Yochanan said, like we had before, of Ula. Who did Ula say it in the name of? Ula said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan Taka. Ula Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Allah Moshe Sinai. Now we're saying the same thing. Rav Asi also said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that Orla b'chutz la'aretz Allah Moshe Sinai. Amar Rav Asi, I have a time we learned Suffolk Orla ba'aretz Asur. The Suffolk Orla in Eretz Yisrael is Asur. Suffolk Daraisa. The Surya Mutter. In Surya it's Mutter. Now, 1 second. Here's the question. If Arla is Halach L'Moshmi Sinai, that means it's a Daraisa. It's Torah Shabbat Peh. Halach L'Moshmi Sinai is a Daraisa. If it's a Daraisa, how could you say that? If we're talking about Daraisa in Chutz La'aretz, it's not talking about Eretz Yisrael. It's a pasuk, right? In Chutz La'aretz, it's Halach L'Moshmi Sinai. How can you say B'Surya it's Mutter? How can you say Surya it's Mutter? It's Halach L'Moshmi Sinai. So you say Halach L'Moshmi Sinai that in Chutz La'aretz that Arla applies. So how can you say that if it's a suffix in Surya, it's mutter, sveika daraisa l'chumra. Ishtamam k'shachar. He was stunned for a moment. And he answered, Amalei ema kach. This is what I'll say. Kach ema. I will say kach nemer. That was halacha mishmi Sinai. It's Sfeika Mutter Vada Aser. In other words, it's a pasuk that Arla is Aser in Eretz Yisrael. What about Chutz La'aretz? Chutz La'aretz, Arla is Allah Mashmi Sinai. If it's Allah Mashmi Sinai, how could a suffix be Mutter? How could a suffix Surya is Chutz La'aretz, right? Surya is Chutz La'aretz. So if it's part of Eretz Yisrael, it would be Sfeika Da'aretz would surely be Aser. But it's Chutz La'aretz. But if you say that in Chutz La'aretz, Arla is a Doraisa, is a Allah Mashmi Sinai, how could a suffix there be Mutter? The answer is that was Allah Mashmi Sinai. That it's only Aser in Eretz Yisrael, but not in Chutz La'aretz. That was the point. Ema kach, that was how the Allah Mashmi Sinai was said. The Torah Shabbat said was said to Moshe was that yes, Arla in Eretz Yisrael is a pasuk. In Chutz La'aretz, it's Allah Mashmi Sinai, it's Aser, but if it's a suffix, it's Mutter. Right? Kach nemer sveika mutter, vada aser. That's the halacha mishum Sinai. That if you have for sure arla in chutz la'aretz, that's aser. A suffix is mutter. Amar Vasi, Amar Yochanan. Lokin ala klayim devar Torah. For klayim, you get malchus min Torah. Malchus min Torah. You get malchus if you make klayim. If you plant klayim, it's lokin ala klayim. We're talking about b'chutz la'aretz. Otherwise, there's no chiddush in that. That's sure an aser. Rashi says lokin ala klayim b'chutz la'aretz devar Torah. K'lof ha'kamei. Amalei Rav Elazar. Here the Gemara says Lu Ravasi, because Rav Elazar was not the same generation. It wasn't Rav Elazar. Rav Yossi was not in the same generation as Rav Yochanan. Rav Yochanan was much later. Rav Yochanan wasn't a Tana. So it's Amalei Rav Elazar Lu Rav Yossi Ba'anan Tanan Haklayim Midivrei Sofrim. How could you say that Klayim in Chutz La'aretz you get Malchus Min Torah? We just said that the Mishnah said a Klayim Midivrei Sofrim is only Midivrei Sofrim. We just had that Mishnah Amid Beis. Klayim is only Aser in Chutz La'aretz Midivrei Sofrim. That's what the Mishnah said, right? Chodesh Aser Min Torah B'chol Makom Arla Halacha Klayim Midivrei Sofrim. It's only Aser Midivrei Sofrim. It's Lokasha Kam B'Klayim Kam B'Kavas Ilan. Are we talking about grafting a tree or Klayim mixing grains, two grains with grape seeds? K'Shmuel Dam Shmuel. Pasuk says guard my ordinances. The chok that I gave you before, kfar. What does that mean? I told you before not to mix two different species of animals. Don't mix breed of two different animals. And don't plant your seeds. Just like animals are mixing. How do you mix them? By breeding two animals together. The same thing with the field, also with trees, when you graft trees. Mixing breeds of animals applies both in Eretz Yisrael and in Chutz La'aretz. The field also applies in Chutz La'aretz, meaning if you graft trees together, that's also in the Eretz Yisrael. It says your field mounting Eretz Yisrael. Says that's excluding Zraim and Chutz La'aretz. Meaning, what are we saying? That if you plant seeds together in Chutz La'aretz, that's only Drabanan. That's what we mean that's only an Isser Drabanan. But if you graft trees in Chutz La'aretz, that's a Doraisa. That's what we mean. So now we're explaining Klayim in more detail. We're saying Klayim in Chutz La'aretz. In Eretz Yisrael, it's all Asr. In Chutz La'aretz, it's only Drabana. It's Drabana if you're mixing seeds. If you're grafting trees, that's a Doraisa. So we're up to the story here of Rav Hanan, Rav Anan, right? Even with Agol Sagra on the side, and we'll pick up from here tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem, from this story. Have a good day.